Welcome to the Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, young adventurers. Dylan here. And on today's podcast, I interview my friend Jason Weimann. He's a buddy of mine that I know from the OCVR meetup community, a community I founded a number of years ago. When I backed a headset on Oculus, my mind was blown. He was one of the first guys a part of it, and he's been a part of every hackathon that we've thrown and a lot of events. And he is amazing in terms of teaching people how to build video games or VR games, and all inside Unity. He's got his own YouTube channel with a big following. He does a ton of talks about this. And so he's got a lot of great information to share on how to get up and running with game dev. And I haven't talked to him in a while, so I'm so excited to bring on my friend, Jason Weimann.
Hey, Dylan. Hey, thanks for having me on here, man. I'm pretty excited too. Like I said, we haven't talked in quite a while, so I'm kind of pumped to get caught up on what I've been doing and what you've been doing and just talk about all the fun stuff.
Dude, no, it's fun because like when we first met through like the OCVR meetup, it was one of those things that was just it was a passion thing. We all like VR. VR is cool. Let's just all hang out, and then we would get together in like these small little groups, and we'd either talk about things, or we'd drink and show things off that we've made, or we'd like get together and build things. And like you were always there, like building and creating and just chilling with all the people. And you know, I miss that pre-pandemic, good times, get together and have some fun together.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've told people before, like you were kind of the reason that I really got into VR, to be honest. Like, I mean, I got into VR, I saw the stuff a little bit, but then when I went to had I not gone to the hackathon that you guys had hosted, I mean, I probably wouldn't have even started a YouTube channel, right? Because I never would have gotten into VR, never would have gotten into talking about that and into just going into YouTube stuff. But going to that hackathon and like experiencing building a VR game with a bunch of other people who were also weird nerds like me that were interested in this stuff and like didn't care that it didn't look real and was slow and laggy at first, and like all excited. So like that, yeah, it was great for me. And I mean, it made a big difference in just being able to go share that experience with everybody else and really dive into this stuff now.
Dude, it was so meaningful for me to just be a part of it. And I, when it first got started years ago, I didn't know anything about the space. It was just like, this is cool. No one's doing anything. No one's showing how do we figure this all out together. And like that coming together for the hackathons where we could all walk around and help each other and learn. And it was so fun. And it was also like, it's just really, you're right, cool to just be around other people that were as passionate about it as you are and I am, and just to like build and show things off. Because I feel like sometimes like I like the hackathons because it's that small window that all the things you ever say you're gonna do, you actually get up and you actually do in a small little hackathon. And you're like, oh, I'll build that thing eventually. And now like you're with your friends, so you kind of got to do it, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and you're time limited, and there's lots of external pressure, right? You got like the group of people there working, so like no wanting to give up or wanting to wait and just get it done. So it really works. And the other thing I really like is that you get kind of a mix of skills, right? You'll get like go to hackathons, go with people who don't know how to code at all sometimes, but they make great music or great art, or they can combine other things, or a lot of times. The better situation for me is like I go and there's another coder there who knows other things that I'm not as good at, and they know them well, and then we can kind of like trade knowledge and learn from each other while we're working on projects. Or a lot of times I'll learn some cool art stuff from artists while I'm doing them too. I have a blast like kind of learning and just seeing like what we can combine.
Yeah, there's that coder cluster that happens. The coders kind of congregate together in a group, right? And they're like, and it's like, oh, you're 5 programmers all together. There's no artist. You're like, separate. Like, no, just cluster them together. I've got a box. I got a primitive shape here. There's nothing you can't make me do.
Yeah. Well, one of the coders can make some coder art.
Yeah, totally. It's a thing. It's alive and well. What was what hackathon were you part of? Was that at Spaces? Do you remember what the theme was for the hack that you were first at?
Oh, I think the first one was education based, and I got to work on a project with Aaron.
Yeah, VR classroom.
A virtual classroom thing. That was really cool.
I remember that. Oh God, that was 2016. I think it
A long time ago, yeah.
was something like
And that was
that.
mostly his project. I just kind of got to hop on and help with it. He'd already kind of had it in the work, so
Yeah,
it was really cool though.
didn't he have like, I thought I remember like, because you could, I think we had people spend the night there, and I think like I came back, there was like he was doing like that late night. There's like that Saturday night late night. Oh my God, I think I'm in too deep. It's like where you lose sight of the tunnel you've gone into, and you're now like, and you're just panicking with Red Bulls and all that fun stuff. I can't remember. Is that what happened with him? Because I know he ended up winning. I think you guys
Yeah,
ended up winning
it
that.
won. I remember we went kind of crazy with it too. Like
Yeah.
we did come out of some tunnels on that. Like literally, I think we made some health simulator stuff in there too, as part of the classroom and stuff.
Yeah. You had that. I remember there's a classroom. You
There's
could
a
go into
Coliseum.
Coliseum. You'd go into the Roman Coliseum and it would grow up around you.
That was one of the
Yeah.
coolest VR effects I remember seeing at first, right? Because they're like standing there and it's like, oh, this is weird, it's kind of empty. And then all of a sudden, Coliseum starts shaking on up. Like, well done.
Yeah. You could be a blood molecule. I think that you could do that. There's something like that. And there's something. Was there a toilet seat? Toilet?
Yeah, that was the one I think you could come out of. I think you were a blood thing or something, and then it turned into something else. Because the art looked a little bit different.
There's a little loopiness that happens. There's that kind of like that energy of like, I've been up a little late and I think this is kind of funny, and like is it kind of steer where that goes.
I don't know if that one actually made it in, but I think we were just talking around. Yeah, I think you could shoot like viruses and stuff going through the blood cells as you were like a little ship blasting viruses.
Wow.
A nanobot.
That's so much. I love the energy, man. Like being a part of those things is so inspiring to see. It shows you all what we can make. It's just, but you do learn. I mean, especially because you teach a lot of game development. Like there's like the energy to get up and going is one step, but then to turn that into like a fully released like game or application, there's these tranches that you have to go through to be able to like carry on that energy. You know, sometimes they spin into business, sometimes you spin into teams, sometimes that thing spins out. What have you seen as a pattern, you know, from that kind of like ideation thing all the way out to like full on application that's out in the store?
Oh, like from actual straight up hackathon games?
Well, it's hackathon or you know, self-inflicted hackathon where you're in your room and you actually go and you build out a thing. You're like, oh, this is cool. Like, can you talk to me a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, for me, like with a lot of games, I would say probably 9 out of 10 of the game projects that I start, I end up abandoning within like less than a week, right? I get into it and then I realize that it's just not the project that I want to build, right? So I'll constantly, and part of that is like just constantly watching stuff. I'll get inspired by something and then I'll get ready to try this thing off, and never ends. I end up killing the majority of them, right? But the things that I see really stay around, or the projects that I see like really go like from beginning to actually launching, are the ones where I think for me at least, I kind of know like right from the start. Like I get into it, and within maybe the first week or 2 weeks, I'm pretty damn positive that this is a game that I need to finish, need to build, and need to release, and need to get it done. Now, whether a lot of the time, like I'll make that decision there, and it may not get to like the point that I can kind of envision it. Like I might at that point be envisioning something huge, but what I'll try to do is at least commit to releasing it, so that if I get to the point where like I'm the 2, 3, 4 weeks in, and I think this is something that I need to do, I need to release it, I'll at least commit internally to releasing it at no matter what level I can get it to, whether so that I'm kind of locked in and building it out and getting it done. Now, I don't really want to talk too much about me specifically, just because like I don't know that I'm terrible at getting, or that I'm great at getting games. Like I can get them done, but like there's a friend of mine who did something really impressive that I wanted to just talk about, that I think is more worth sharing. That's a more repeatable, reusable, reliable strategy. So he is a software developer by nature, who's just used to writing code, but not game stuff at all, right? And not so much in this stuff. And he decided to make and release a game, and followed a relatively simple strategy of just dedicating a set amount of time every week to building games. So he works a full-time job, has a wife and 2 kids. It doesn't have a lot of spare time, but just decided, okay, I'm going to dedicate six hours a week, only 6 hours a week. I'm going to be a game developer, 2 hours at a time, just 2-hour sprints, 3 nights a week. I'm going to plan out what I'm going to do because I don't have a lot of time. So he has a relatively good plan of what he wants to do, so that when he sits down, he knows exactly what the thing he's working on is. It's already in a tracking system ready to go. And with that system, right? So with that process of just being repetitive and literally just like the key thing of just locking that in, has been able to get a whole game done and released out on Steam in a year. So start to finish, full game, solo in a year, just out on Steam. So,
do you know what that weekly or monthly ritual for scheduling and planning is? Is it like Sunday nights he does his thing? Because sometimes at 3 nights a week at 2-hour sessions you can crush. If you got like over, because 90 minutes is that kind of that sweet spot of time. You take some of the flow. 2 hours, just past 2 hours, you get a little like you kind of drop out of the flow a bit. But I'd be curious about the cadence of how does he plan? Like what does that piece look like? Do you know?
So I talked to him a bit about it when I did an interview with him a couple weeks ago. And one of the things, there were 2 points when he mentioned planning, where one was kind of at the end of the session. So like when he was done working on the thing, what he was going to work on next. And then also he has a weekly session where he shares his progress with a group of other game developers. And then I think a lot of what happens is during that time, he'll come up with feedback ideas, things to work on, the next thing to do. And that's part of the 2-hour period too. So working throughout that period while going through and everybody sharing their feedback, that's kind of his 2-hour chunk, and he's coding at the same time and building up that list.
See, that's cool. Yeah, that's kind of like a Gamers Anonymous thing going on. Hey, I build games.
And that is something I highly recommend to any aspiring game developers. Get a group of like-minded people who want to do or are doing the same things that you're doing, and meet with them regularly. Just to talk about how things are going, what kinds of things you're running into. See how you can help each other. I mean, it's not so much that you have to like help each other write your code and fix the code and stuff, but giving each other advice and taking a look at problems every now and then, and also helping hold each other accountable. But also, it's really like getting real good feedback from peers instead of trying to get feedback from friends and family or strangers, right? Because peers are a lot better at it.
Yeah, and that's the power when we were doing like regular OCVR meetups and events like that. We'd have like demo nights where next month there's a demo night coming up, and I got to show something off, and then you have those things, and then you have the ability of there's a problem that happens and where people get into these vacuums where they don't talk to anybody. They get in these game dev holes or VR dev holes where they're in this silo. They don't look at anything. They don't connect to anybody. They don't do things. And then they'll get stuck on things where if they would just get outside of their shell and talk to people about it and say, I don't know how to solve this problem, or I don't know about this thing, or I think this thing's super new. Someone else can just, another developer can just go, oh, just add a comma or whatever it might be to the thing, and they'll get up and going. But there's that thing where people sometimes get in those weird silo holes. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, all the time. It's easy to fall into. It's not like I haven't done it myself before. Like, being at a company for a while, and like, especially you get switched around teams and stuff. It's easy to kind of like fall into the hole of just working on stuff yourself, not letting other people see your stuff, really, not sharing your stuff. And like, if you don't share your stuff for a while, it starts to feel uncomfortable to share your thing, like just sharing your code and stuff. If nobody's seen your code in 3 years, like suddenly you feel a little anxious, like, is this good enough to share? Like, can I share? And those kinds of things hop up, and then you start to get more and more anxious. And I feel like you can kind of get into this bubble of keeping things very to yourself. And it's terrible for just growth, getting better, and getting things done.
Yeah. That's 100%. You're right. That like I'm afraid to share my code, afraid to like don't look, nobody look. Like and then you're right. It causes that pattern, that cycle where you then get it's like the the whole thing with the COVID stuff is you get antisocial from being locked indoors, and then all of a sudden like you're like it now becomes weird to talk to people, which is
Oh yeah, I know. I get like that now too. I mean, not that I wasn't kind of weird like that. I was always weird like that. It's strangest thing is like I feel totally fine talking to people on the internet, talking to people on a microphone and camera. like
Yeah.
in person or for some reason like on a phone, I just feel like a weirdo. I feel like all uncomfortable, like unless it's a friend, like it's someone I know, but like talking to random people, I can do it fine on Zoom, no problem. It's the only place I feel comfortable talking to a stranger.
Busted that wide open. Yeah, I feel the same way when I'm talking around. Like if I'm getting around and talking to people about virtual reality development, design, things like that. Like let's jam. But also, people get into this like sports talk, like their favorite sports team. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say here. Anybody play VR? No, I
don't know to figure out which sport it is and if there's a VR version.
I wear these. I wear these Manchester United like kind of sweatpants, and I walk around with them. And people are like, oh, you're a part of your fans of Manchester. I'm like, no, I just they're comfortable, and they're like, oh.
People probably say things to you all the time that you got no idea what they're talking about too.
They do. Right, yeah. I'm trying to like this area. This. So what I'd be curious is about like I don't think I've ever asked this about you. Like, how did you get into game development and like what was that journey for you from young Jason to where you are now?
That's a good one. Okay. So let's see. I mean, I started trying to make games when I was a little kid, right? Like I had no idea how to make games, but I got like my first computer when I think I was like 7 or 8, something like that. I had a little Commodore 64 hooked up to like, the shitty old little 13-inch black and white TV. I think eventually I got to hook it up to a color TV. But anyway, so I on that thing, like I only had a couple games, so I would try to like make my own games as I got older. So, like you got to like 10, 11, I would try to make my own games. They'd basically be like choose your own adventure text things where you could play for 30 seconds and the game was over.
So cool.
But I was like I would get really into it, and then I kind of dropped off of that for a long time. I mean, I still kind of dabbled with programming and game stuff, but didn't really do anything with it again until I was working at Intel on server stuff. So working on like server automated testing stuff. And I got a message from a friend of mine who was a game master for EverQuest. So EverQuest was like a video game that I used to play obsessively, right? I would play it nonstop, like
first addiction.
Thousands of days of played time on my characters. Like it was a bad obsession, right? I played it more than my kid plays games now.
It's like an OG WoW. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just nonstop. Anyway, so he messages me one day and was like, hey, you know how to code, right? You want to come work for me? And I was like, what? Like, so actually, let me rewind. I hadn't played the game in like 2 years, right? I hadn't played EverQuest in a couple years. One day I came home from work and I was like, I'm just going to I'm going to patch up EverQuest, log in and see if anybody still plays and say hi to the old guild. Because I had a guild and like a whole bunch of friends on there and hadn't talked to them in a long time. Yeah. I logged in, I get a random message from the guy who was a friend who was a GM. Hey, do you want to come work for me? We're starting this new game company, or I'm starting at this new job at this company, working on an MMO. You want to come work for me? I was like, totally shocked, out of nowhere. I hadn't done anything for it or anything. I was like, yes. Like, all right. So I instantly got excited, started talking to him, found out the info. Yeah. Had a quick phone interview, and then told my wife, I was like, hey, babe, I think we might have to move to California because I'm going to get a new job. And we had like 2 little kids at the time. And I was, it was a little, it was kind of sprung on her. Anyway, like 2 weeks later, moved down to California, took the job, started working in video games. And it was a little bit rough at first. I got laid off like 3 weeks later, because there was like a whole thing going on where the company was being bought out while I was in the process of getting hired. So they'd already like figured out layoffs and stuff long before I'd even gotten hired. Just nobody knew that this stuff was coming.
Wow.
It was a weird. It worked out well because I ended up just getting a raise and a bonus for getting laid off and rehired. So it was weird.
Is that happening? Is that we're gonna let you go and they're gonna rehire you as the new company? Is that what happened?
Yeah. So basically, I got hired on. 3 weeks later, I got laid off with a severance package, and then I got rehired like 4 weeks later with a bonus and a bigger pay. So
strong.
I mean, it was a weird situation. It kind of sucked, like going in like that. It wasn't the best, But it ended up not working out terrible. I mean, for me at least, like obviously bad for everybody that didn't get rehired. So.
Yeah, that's
But yeah, anyway, from there, just been in video games ever since. Just working on MMOs and mobile games and VR games and VR. Like I said, VR was mostly just you kind of inspired it. I got into it, thought it was neat. Went to your hackathons, got really into it. Released a whole bunch of VR games on Steam and stuff, and had a blast with it. And then that got me teaching. So then after that, I was like, hey, I want to teach how to make this VR stuff. I mean, when I made my first VR game, I was actually thinking about teaching how to do VR stuff. Just ended up that my wife would play it, and that had never happened before. I made that VR baseball game. My wife kept playing it and didn't put it down, and like this never once happened before where my wife wanted to play something I made. So decided to release it as a Steam launch title.
You know, it's one of those the VR baseball game you made was odd. It's, lack of a better word, stupidly simple, but really fun. Like trying to hit home runs with that in the distance. I remember just trying to crack those out and just trying to figure out what is the magic secret for trying to do that. I remember you putting did you put ads up on the banners in the background or something like that? I thought you did something.
That. I put up. I think I put some OCVR banners up there and other stuff. Yeah, I put Sweet Escape banners on there. I was like, hey, I got banners. Like, if you're ever gonna put an ad somewhere, like put it on a baseball field banner area.
It was beautiful, man, dude. Like that was one of the first games, and that thing was pretty successful for a while, right? Like it
did great. Yeah, that thing sold ridiculous numbers of copies, and like I said, I made it in essentially a weekend as a test project to do a video for, and just polished it up after that, obviously. But
so then when you just look at that. You went, you had a hack. Then was it because you realized that people are having fun? Is because your wife actually played it, and you're like, Mikey likes it, kind of thing? Or like,
yeah, I was like, my wife likes it. It's like, if my wife likes it, like other people might like it. And then the weird thing was, like, I would take it around to places, like to friends' houses and stuff, and there would always be one person that would just keep playing it until I tore it down. Right? Like I would have to. It would be like they'd keep playing until I'd take the thing down. And like, all right, I'll leave it. Like I had to tear it down. There's just like people that go in there for like hours, especially that were really into sports. And there wasn't anything else interesting going on for them, sports related. They're just sitting there like having a blast with it.
Dude, yeah, I completely agree. That's where you needed to have, like, I know with Sweet Escape, we had to put like 3-minute timers in there just so otherwise people would just keep going. And like you have to pull that like fake, oh, I accidentally unplugged it. Oh, I don't it looks like it's shut down. Sorry. Just gotta
get in there for half an hour.
There's a line of people. You're like, because if you take off the headset, you're the bad guy. But if it just times out or if it just shuts down, then it's just, well, such as the luck, right? So one, I just love to learn like a little about the journey about. So you made the VR baseball, which I'm very familiar with. I think I have it on Steam. I'm almost positive I have it on my Steam account. And then going through there, what were some of the other games that you made in VR along the way? And what were some of the things like that? Like, what was there ones that stood out to you that you thought was awesome that you really enjoyed on the journey of you making stuff in VR? Is there like classics that you look fondly on, like VR baseball?
I don't know. So when I went through the next one I made after that was like straight to a shooter, just because at the time there weren't a lot of shooters, and I was like, I got to make a shooter because this is the easy and fun. Like, you can just shoot all kinds of stuff. And that also, like, I mean, financially did great and stuff, and it was a lot of fun to work on and just a lot of fun to build. But it wasn't anything like super exciting or like unique, you know, where like it made me super thrilled. The one project that we never actually finished building, but I thought like had a lot of potential, just couldn't quite figure out that I really wanted to do though, was a jetpack style game with just virtual reality jetpacks that were hand thruster controlled. I had a lot of fun like flying around like that and controlling like that. I just never could come up with a fun enough game, right? That wasn't like, you know, Spider-Man or Iron Man, right? Like I could come up with like Spider-Man or Iron Man copy, but like something else that was kind of like unique and fun with the flying around and controlling stuff. So I'd always want, but
yeah, no,
it's just more me complaining about things I didn't do than talking about cool things that I did play.
Yeah, I mean, you get these cool mechanics, but you don't know what to do with the cool mechanic once you have it. Like I know Population One did a good job at dropping in, where you can kind of fly around in the beginning, and then you land, and then you can climb, and you can shoot things. And it's like blending together Sweet Escape, the shooter, the flying. They took cool mechanics and they put it in like some sort of story format or whatever that made sense. But that's the thing. Sometimes you make a cool mechanic, but you don't know how it fits into a thing. And then you don't know what to do with it once you have it, because you could just fly around, right? Or I would like to see. There's an old game. I don't know if you remember this one. It's an old game called Super Metal Warriors. Did you ever hear about that?
I don't know if I have.
One of my childhood classic games. I think it was Super Nintendo. It might have been Nintendo. I'm pretty sure it was Super Nintendo. But there'd be 3 or 4 different types of robots, giant robots. A big, heavy tank-like, a middle one that was kind of like a warrior, and then like a flying beast that just only flew, right? And what was great about the game, you'd be in these different maps, and when you'd go and you'd shoot them, the thing would get damaged, and if it got too damaged, it would blow up, or you could eject, and then you're basically the little flyer guy about the size of a pixel, and you'd fly away as the other guy just tries to shoot you with this giant machine. And then you can get into these like little crevice spots where you could go behind a hole and then also get into another bot, and then the battle would resume. And it was a really cool combination because of the power exchange of, it's like sometimes, you'd be the flying guy and the big heavy guy could blow him up. And then all of a sudden you'd switch bots. But it was a cool combination between giant Super Metal Warriors and these little flying bots that you'd go around and you'd play around in. And so it is kind of the things like those classic things that I see that we're making an arena shooter that's not necessarily the same thing, but those elements of the different power dynamics and people coming together and how they play against each other. It's that taking what was magic of being a kid and kind of reinventing that into this new VR space. So when you say the flying mechanic, that's what comes to my mind is like, how do you apply that mechanic in a new way that actually is like a coherent story?
That's always the hard part for me. And mixing it all up. I have fun experimenting with it, but like combining it into a fun game is like the hardest part for me.
Do you have like a design process, or is it all about development? Is there just straight, I'm gonna build it, see if it's cool, or is there?
And then I ask a designer how to make it fun. My design process is like build it out, think it's gonna be good, and then I go, hey, game designer buddies, you wanna hop on a call with me and tell me how to make this into something fun? And then they fill my head up with crazy ideas, and I go from there, and then come back to them constantly.
That is a lot of what a designer does. They come up with crazy ideas and they
come up with great ideas. And like every time I talk to one of my game designer friends, I just get amazing ideas that improve things. Like I'll show them anything and it just gets improved dramatically, in 2 minutes of talking. And at a point, like I'll have to tell them to stop. I'll call them back because they got too many things to work on after like 5 minutes,
Well, it's the, saying one word, one mechanic is, wouldn't it be cool, which is always a sign of feature creep, right? Which is the preemptive feature creeping. Wouldn't it be cool? And then they insert a mechanic, and then it's going to take you a week or whatever, a day, a week, however long to build that thing. So they can, it's just, it's so easy to kick that out. But taking all that stuff and weaving it together is a bit of a trick. I didn't even realize, for a while, I didn't realize that there was a designer was a thing. I just thought artist, developer. And then realized that, oh no, you need to have something, you can do those things, but if you actually had someone dedicated, they kind of lay out the train tracks as the artist and developer builds the train and drives down the tracks. So
right, and usually the designers are doing quite a bit of the implementation stuff too. They're doing kind of a mix of the figuring out like what actually should be there and then putting the things. They're kind of like combining all of the stuff. Think of the designer as like the person that slaps together the art and the code. With some help from from both, right? Like they get the art, they need some help from the artist to set up the lighting and all the other stuff in the scene, and then they need some help from programmers to set up some stuff. But a lot of the like actual game setup and like putting all of the content in game, like you do not want your artists doing that or your programmers doing it because they're not going to do as good a job, and it's just not a good use of their time. You want to have your designers who are skilled at doing that kind of stuff, and that's what they love to do, doing that.
Yeah. So what excites you about like teaching game design, and what areas right now are you that really excites you?
For me, it's just like I just like watching people learn how to code. Like seeing people learn how to make new stuff and then seeing them send me their new stuff that they make or their YouTube channels that they've started where they start sharing their things or their games that they've released and gotten out there. That's always kind of a blast for me, just like watching people learn stuff and get these new skills and be able to make the things that they kind of want to make. Like I can already make the games that I want to make. And I just do those in my spare time, but it's neat to like be able to give that skill or that ability to other people, especially kids. That's really cool. Like watching like little kids learn how to code is a blast, or yeah, high school kids and stuff. Like giving them something like they can start with right away, and then just kind of jump in, and anybody can do it. Like you can just learn how to code from home. All you really need is like a computer. You can use a crappy little old laptop and small internet connection. You can get to a YouTube video. You can make a game. You know, got a gig of hard drive space to download the editor, and you're good to go. Or maybe 2 gigs. So, yeah. And 2 gigs of hard drive space, a little bit of RAM, and a system. Like the only thing really stopping you is time and effort.
Yeah, I remember when the 2 gigs was the max space on a computer. I remember going back then and looking at those things, looking at the RAM.
And they came out with like gig hard drives.
Oh,
I think my friend went into debt like many thousands of dollars to get gigabyte hard drive. Yeah.
I know. So I see terabytes now. I'm like, what?
They're on a little flash drive in your pocket.
Yeah. And you're right. What's really cool is when you see little kids, like young kids, like I see 9-year-olds come to the hackathons where their mom comes and drops them off, and they go and build things and develop things, and you're just like, you're 9. Like, how are you doing this? And they're just like, there's so much energy that they can just dump into it, and they just obsess on it. And it's really cool to see them like progress and even keep like in tow with like some other people, and like their ability to just absorb information is like crazy. So
it is.
Yeah.
It comes a lot earlier than people think too. It's weird. My wife always tells me like that kids understand more than people give them credit for, and people like treat kids too much like little kids or like babies almost. But and I kind of think she's right, because I see like when you just constantly teach kids things, like you can teach kids anything. Like kids riding horses when they're like 3 years old and stuff, like jumping motorcycles and stuff. Like you can teach them pretty much anything. You just gotta give them put a little effort in there and show them the stuff. You know,
like totally
I don't want to go too long on this, but like one of the funnest things I did was when my kid was in 5th grade, I got to go into their class and like teach all those kids how to make Flappy Birds. As I got to go through like teach them in little groups of 4 and 5 how to make a Flappy Bird clone, like from scratch. Like here's how to make it. I didn't touch the keyboard. It's just me stepping them through it, and they had a blast. And I could see at least a couple of them getting really into it and excited about it, and almost all of them understanding what was going on, and that it wasn't just like magic that makes Fortnite that they were playing on their phone, or the little game that they were playing, that it's really just these things moving around and that they can control those things. So
it is magic.
That was a blast for me.
It is magic. I don't know what you're talking about. Code is magic. Code is straight magic. You in a virtual world can actually say, oh, I'm going to shrink you down to this big, and then I'm going to put a rocket on your back, and you're going to fly around the space, and you're going to experience all of that. You know, so it is absolutely magic. It's just, you just use, I'd say, zeros and ones, but you know, if then statements, I should say, to really make that possible. And so it's like you're talking before about being a programmer and like networking code and things like that. But then when you go to build things in a virtual world or in a game engine, you know, when you program a thing and you hit a button and then a giant explosion happens, that's the I did that magic spell book. To me, that's you say it's not magic. I feel like it is.
I guess it's more like giving them the power of that magic, I guess. Right?
Yeah,
No, that like it's not magic that's out of their hands, right? It's the kind of thing that they could do too.
You're Harry Potter with them. Yeah, you're Gandalf. You got the beard and everything. No, man, or Dumbledore. But you look at that, and so many times in like everyone's life, right? They're a lot of like experts in the space. If you go and talk to them, you're like, well, what made you an expert, or what happened? Sometimes there's stories where they're like, well, I was an ordinary kid, and this guy who seemed like he had superpowers came up, and he did something so cool. I wanted to figure out how he did that cool thing. And so I got obsessed with it. And then all of a sudden, years later, I became that dude that can then do that thing along. And so for you to walk in these kids to show them how to make Flappy Bird, you basically gave them the gift of the thing that they love most. You gave them the ability to make that thing, which is like super cool.
And it was fun. And for me, it was also a really good learning experience because I got to see all of the kinds of things like what are the kinds of problems that even like an 8-year-old is going to run into, like how can I address those so that I can teach things in a way that even an 8-year-old is going to understand it and not miss like the little nuances that people are going to get afraid to ask. So it was like a good learning experience for me too, and just a blast. And also my kids still coding over there, I can hear them typing away.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, on the journey of being a coder, you kind of get this thing where like you learning code, like you're learning a little bit of like, oh, I understand it. You build your first game, but there's also that like whole imposter syndrome that comes up and that whole journey. Can you talk to me a little about like the emotional journey that you've seen people go through as they learn to become a programmer? What do they first start out with? Like, I'm not a programmer, I don't know how to code, I can't build games, to like, I am one, till they have that identity. Like, what happens along that journey? What do they need to learn? How much time is it? Like, what is like a little because you've brought so many people through that path.
Sure. I think a lot of the time people just start off thinking that it's impossible or that they don't like math, so they can't learn how to code. It was really weird because I kind of thought I didn't really think the same thing, but I used to think that coding was a lot of math. And part of that is like if you have to do machine language coding or like a lot of assembly stuff, it's a little bit more math and it's a little bit more of a pain. But it really is. It's not like it's not math related at all. All code is like learning a language. It's a lot like learning Spanish, but easier. I was never able to pass my Spanish classes. I think the best I got was like a D in Spanish, but C# I could read really easy because there's only like 20 words in the entire language. But when you realize that like with code, that it's really just like there's a certain number of instructions and certain number of things that you can do, and that number of things is really small. It's like 10 to 20 things total. Once you kind of get an understanding of those, which I'd say probably takes most people around a year or so, that's when people start to feel, I think, like a programmer, and they start to get a lot more confident. And then the interesting part, because you're going to talk about imposter syndrome, right? That doesn't really kick in yet, right? So like say right around a year or so is when as a junior developer, like you're starting to feel pretty confident because people can ask you to do things and you might not know how to do them, but you can definitely like Google how to do it and probably figure it out for 50% of the things or more, right? And so that starts to come around like the first year or so, and that's assuming that you're in an environment where they're not asking you crazy senior hard stuff, like where it's appropriate level stuff. And I would say like around a year you'll be good with that, and then at about 2 years in is probably where most people seem to start getting a little overconfident. Right at 2 years in, people think like, "Hey, I've been doing this for a very long time." At least it's happened to me and a lot of my friends. Right? They start to think like, "Hey, I've been doing this for a long time. I know what I'm doing. I can make this thing really pretty and really cool and do it really quick." So it's really good. like not realizing like there's a little bit more to it than that. But you start to get faster and kind of like into these processes and start to get really good. And then for me, what happened later was a couple years later, you start to realize like you'll come across problems, right? So you'll start to come across problems with the stuff that you've done in the past or things that you've seen or new problems that are a lot more difficult than what you used to run into, and quickly realize that like don't know nearly as much as you thought you knew, right? That there's a whole lot more going on that like you just kind of ignored and didn't really understand. And that's when I'd say the imposter syndrome really like starts. That's when you're like, wait a minute, there's a whole bunch of crap I don't know. And there are a lot of people that do know this stuff. When you start to realize that there are a lot of people that know a lot of things you don't know, that's when it starts to kick in. Eventually, though, at least for most people, the way, not that you'll ever, most people don't really ever completely get rid of that feeling of like, do I really know what the hell I'm doing, or like, is this all just nonsense? But like, I guess like for most people and for me, what happens is just like you get through going through learning the stuff and trying to figure these things out constantly, and that fear, that imposter syndrome, will drive the learning and the growth and just kind of get you better and better at what you're doing. At least that's what I've seen for most people. Some people get it and then freak out, quit, and then go do something else, especially if they're feeling that imposter syndrome and then something goes on at their company and there's some layoffs and they lose their job, and then suddenly they think that, oh, hey, it was right, it was me. Like, and really it's probably not. It's just that, company was downsizing and they got rid of people, or they got rid of the whole team. A lot of the time with game companies, like, they wiped out the entire team, right? They shut down the whole studio or something.
Yeah.
So I've seen people do that, but a lot of time people just eventually start to grow or get over it, or start just communicating more with people. And it's easy to stay in that imposter syndrome mode when you don't talk to other people and you don't communicate, share with other people, and learn from other people constantly. I feel like that kind of really just knocks it right away. 'Cause the second you don't know something and they're talking about it, like, and just have them explain it to you once you've got these people that you're talking to all the time.
Wrapped out. That's super interesting, because you're talking about, first you start out of inspiration, like, wow, this is really cool. Look what I can do. And it's like, it's so simple. And you get along the thing and you get good at the simple thing, right? So you start to hone those skill sets and you get really good at, slamming through projects. Oh, I have this feature, get it done. Bang, get it done. You start moving through this process. And then you start to get that mid-level full of yourself kind of thing. Now you're like, I know this. I'm super senior. And then you start to move into other areas for coding that you realize, oh, actually, these whole other subsections I don't understand, or I don't understand the full game engine, or whatever those pieces might be. And you're like, and then the fear drives you, because you're like, oh, I've put up this identity that I know everything, but I don't, and I know I don't, and so I need to figure this out so that I don't like let myself and everybody else down around me. Then you're off to the races to try to just gobble up that information. And if you're willing to get vulnerable and just ask people, hey, I don't know what that means, I don't know what a delegate is, or whatever the thing might be, then you can just over time just naturally get better and better, until finally you just kind of recognize that you are senior. You understand all the nuances and yes, I could solve this quickly this way, but I could build it out these other ways and be more stable, or more robust, or more scalable, or more, another way to tackle the project. So is it really being able to see a project, but then see multiple paths to be able to execute it? Is that kind of what would make you the feeling of being like mastery over the art of code?
Kind of, and I guess part of it is being able to see what the pitfalls are going to be and avoid them. I mean, that's kind of the biggest value. I'd say, like, the biggest difference between like a junior, or like a mid-level engineer and a senior engineer would be knowing what's going to go wrong before it goes wrong and preventing that from happening. And not going down those paths. And a lot of the time it's because they've done that before, they've seen it done before. Very, very few people make it to knowing how to not make mistakes without making the mistakes themselves and living through them once and seeing the side effects of your spaghetti code, or your big mess, or your little hack that you just kept adding on and on and on, and then suddenly you had to redo everything, or whatever the problem is. And it'll be multiple of those problems, I think, throughout the career. And then you start to see, okay, there are some patterns and some other things that I can do to kind of avoid this, and some tricks that I can use to kind of minimize these things.
It's a really good thought process too, because what it sounds like the difference between like a mid and a senior is like, I'm imagining whack-a-mole, is that you give a mid hammer, a mole comes up, they whack it. I'm good at whacking moles, right? But the senior person goes, no, you don't even want to use that. You said, don't even go over here. Just leave those moles alone. You want to go this way. Avoid that whole problem altogether, and just carve a path over this side. And that way it's being able to map a path and see someone go down that path and be able to already build ahead of that, so those problems never come up and are never a thing. Is that
that's very, very much it. And it's kind of just a spectrum of how good you are at that for how senior you are at the project. And I think it's also going to vary, like, how good people are at that based on the type and scale and size of the project too, right? Like, people are very good at that on a small scale. Some people are very good at that only on a large scale and only at that part, but not the implementation part at all. They're very good at the high level architecture side, but they're not, really on it on the low level performance related side stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think in general, the better you are at that, the more senior you are.
Yeah, there's kind of an not necessarily an upper limit. You just keep going, and then eventually you become John Carmack. As it goes.
I think he was just kind of born that way, though. I don't know. I guess he went through that path, that process really early. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I talked to Dave Taylor. He was on the podcast previously, and he's like, Dave Taylor's like, am I really this bad of a coder? He's like, I was the best in my college. I was like the best. He's like, I am dirt. He's like, I don't understand this. He just didn't realize just how seniors can get. It's not a 1-to-1 like I'm a weightlifter, so I can lift 600 pounds and you can lift 400 pounds and whatever that might be. It's like no, like super senior coders, they can lift thousands and thousands of pounds compared to someone who's doing like a 5-pound, dumbbell. It just there's the upper limit just doesn't stop.
Yeah, I think they're pretty rare though. Carmacks aren't too common, right? That's why everybody knows his name and
yeah. So I know. Well, it'd be great if you start making mini Carmacks out there with what you're doing. You got some young YouTubers that follow you that are like that just start to, because there's got to be some young 9-year-old Carmacks out there that are that are just getting there, because as we go, the Michael Jordans or whoever else comes out there, and then there's other people that model that, and they can just do it so much quicker because we didn't have YouTube. Carmack didn't have YouTube.
Didn't have the internet, or a game engine, or
make your own game engine. God, can you imagine that? Oh, go figure out physics. Let me know when you're back.
Gotta go learn physics real quick so I can build it into computers.
We're so lucky. So talk to me a little bit about like what you got going on, because with your YouTube channel and with everything that you're doing. I know you used to do Unity 3D College, and you evolved to being online now. What do you got with your programs? What is it like for people to go through them? And I'd just love to learn a little bit more about that.
Oh, sure. So mostly I just put everything on my YouTube channel, which is just my name on YouTube. And then I've got a site up at game.courses where I have some paid courses and some free. Well, I have one free course, and I'll add some more free courses sometime soon. You kind of go through and learn game development and get some quizzes along the way to make sure that you're actually understanding it and stuff. And just go through the process of learning to build a game. The free course on there is like an Angry Birds clone. So you go through and just basically make like Angry Birds, but you can add in your own stuff, and there's a bunch of extra birds and stuff, so you can drop them in and change up how they work and stuff, and just kind of learn the basics of how to make a game, how to go through the game flow of like having a player there, killing some enemies, getting some points, that kind of stuff. It's a lot of fun, and it's pretty easy to approach, and the course part is broken into like little 5-minute chunks, so you can just kind of jump in, go along as much as you want, and then continue. Or a lot of time on YouTube, what people will do is just go in, they'll start going through tutorials, and they'll leave a little comment to remind themselves where they left off to. But I think whatever they do, they should jump in and start making games now.
Yeah. Well, on that note, like, what advice would you give if there was a 9-year-old or a 99-year-old that wanted to get into this, that hasn't ever started? Like, what is the pitfall that you see on people just taking those first couple of steps? What causes people to mostly drop off? What causes them to quit or get frustrated and rage quit? And what advice would you give some young hero out there that's trying to level up their mastery of code?
I think the thing that helps people the most to really make it stick is getting it finished. So going through and actually finishing and releasing out a little game. Now, that's not a big thing at all. Like, it's not, that can be a 2-hour project or a 3 or 4-hour project. What I would recommend in general, though, is find a day where you don't have any other commitments, where there's not going to be somebody coming in saying, hey, we need to leave and go do this, or you got to go do this, or something else going on, right? We have a relatively free day. Grab the tutorial. Like I said, I like the Angry Birds one that I have. It's just on YouTube or on the game.courses site. And just start going through and build out the entire thing. Like, finish the game. It's not too hard. It's just step by step, go through the process, and then release it. What happens is, like, once people release the game, which is very simple, it's like a 2-click process to release your game, right? You build it and push it out there. You'll get a web build instantly. Or if you want, you can go through like an extra 5 minutes and put it out onto your phone. But go through that process and release it and share it with people. Because once people share it and like see other people try their thing out, and like they know that they've built it, it suddenly becomes like passion. At least for a lot of people, like they get excited about it because people have seen what they did. Like building a bunch of code and nobody ever seeing it and it never running is nowhere near as exciting as building something and people going, "Oh wow, you built that!" Like, oh,
Yeah.
like it's not, it doesn't have to be amazing. People will still be amazed that you built it. And if you're a kid and you built it, like people will give you money and prizes and awards and stuff. Right? They'll
That
go,
is,
"Wow, that's amazing. Here's a scholarship." Right? And definitely the kind of thing that I would recommend.
what that makes me think about is the first meetup. I think it was May 2014 was the first meetup. I don't know if you were there for that,
I
but
don't think so.
I said I'm gonna make a game. I'll make a VR game. I'm gonna come in and show it off. And I made a VR Bomberman, where it was a first person perspective of being Bomberman, and you'd run around, and like of course things didn't work, and I was just like, I told people I'm gonna bring this in. I told them I'm gonna bring it in, and then I just remember like turning on the camera like we have right here and like recording because it got to work. Of course, the late night push got people through it, and then people would go in, they'd put the headset on and they'd laugh and they'd giggle and they'd run around and they'd blow up things, and I'm sure it got people sick because I was violating about 17 different rules of VR, and it was just amazing. But that you're right, that the joy you get from sharing what you made with someone else and watching them get joy from it, that right there is like it's an addiction, right? And that could happen with, I don't know, telling jokes, that can tell with building games, but you're right, but it's so terrifying. You built this thing and like your identity is attached to this game, and you just, I don't want people to judge my Flappy Birds, especially because I know it's broken or whatever the thing might happen. So that's so cool, man.
Yeah, I mean
so
that's
cool.
the thing that makes me love game development so much. Right? You get to write code and share it with people, and people care.
People, it's one of those things that in very few businesses or art forms or anything that you do is I think the adjective is play. Is they get to play your game. Some people go to work, but they get to play your game. Like my niece and nephew were super pissed at me because I spent the holidays with them, and I was there with the visiting family. And Monday through Friday, I was doing work, so I had my VR headset on and I was playing my game, and they couldn't play it, and they wanted to play it, and they're like, "No, Uncle Dylan's working." And I'm like, they're like, "He's not working. I can hear him giggling and shooting people. He's not." And they'd slide notes in the door. "Can you come out and play? Circle yes or no." And so you're totally right. It's one of those very few spaces that you can be in where your work is play, and it's super rewarding.
Or people are waiting to do what you're working.
Yeah, totally. Like, hold on. Can you imagine like giving someone else like some other type of work? Here's a hammer and a nail. Go build something.
Oh yeah, that's like my toddlers, right? They might do it, but after that, like I want to do the cash register.
Yeah, they'll just go hit each other with it.
That's what they do now. Yeah.
So if people wanted to get a hold of you, how would they reach out to you? How would they get a hold of you? I think in this podcast we have your name on the stream, Jason Weimann. But yeah, how do they get a hold of you? How do they sign up for the course?
Yeah, just shoot me an email, just jason@game.courses, or anything at that. I think really redirects me, but jason@game.courses.
Jason,
yeah, and then just check out the site, check out the thing. I definitely go through the free course first, see if it's kind of thing you're interested in. But I think everybody should at least try to code and try game development. And even if you don't like the like you get into it and you're like, this isn't really for me, the coding part still might be, and you could end up like going through and just the code that you write for a game like this is very similar to the code you write for a web page or an enterprise app or a phone app or something like that. So it's the same kind of skill. So if you like it and you decide you don't really like game development, but you do think the coding thing was kind of cool, you can always make that transition, and the language is kind of the same. You can use C# and all those things, and yeah, it's fun stuff. I recommend everybody try it out.
Yeah, C# is super versatile. Yeah, go make a game. Come back and share it with me. Yeah, no,
definitely share it.
Try it. Try that. Try some art. Try the design. Combine it all together. Show up at a hackathon and go build some stuff.
Real quick.
Yeah, totally.
And if you need art, don't forget there's a ton. So one of the things that prevents people from getting started is thinking that they need to learn how to make art, or they need to go learn Blender and Maya and start making all this art first before they can learn how to make a game. Don't do that unless you want to be an artist. If you want to be a game developer, just buy some art or get some free stuff on the asset store or open game art. There's a ridiculous amount. There's no excuse. You can make any kind of game with free art. You're not making, like, your first game isn't one that you're going to make and release on some brand new IP anyway. Just go use free stuff. Don't let that stop you.
Yeah. And one of the rules that I've always heard is that if it's fun with cubes and squares and those shapes, it's going to be fun with beautiful art. And it's like, don't let that stop you. There's a lot of ways to get around that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Jason, brother, it is super fun. I look forward to the next in-person OCVR meetup we get to do. Spend some times with maybe. What do you think? Should we do? Got a couple options for you. Should we just do just get together and talk about the latest and greatest things? Should we have some sort of social gathering where it's like alcohol and like demos, or should we do like a hackathon? What do you think?
I'm leaning towards the demos just because I'm tired. And I want to see what everybody else has been building and just kind of hang out at first. But I mean, I think a hackathon would be fun too. But I want to start with some demos, see what everybody's been up to, and just kind of catch up with some drinks and stuff. And let everybody present their cool stuff and show off the neat new simulators and crazy stuff that they're building.
We'll do a demo night soon. We'll figure that out. And yeah, I remember one of the last hackathons, it was like getting towards Saturday, like night-ish time. And you're like, later. And you just like got in your car and like you went. I was like, where's he going? He's like, you're like, nah, I'm not gonna go sleep on the floor. Like I remember that you had a clear game. You're like, look, I've planned my plan. I've got it worked out. Everything's working smoothly. I'm gonna come in tomorrow. Like you didn't do like the grind through to the end and then like suffer at like 10 in the morning on a Sunday. Like I was like, well, that's a man who's got a plan. Like
I've gotten too old for it and too achy. Like laying on a hard floor just kills me now. And knocked out by 7 or 8 o'clock and up at 4 in the morning. So it's it's all kinds of messed up. I feel really weird because for the first 30 some years of my life, I was up until 2 a.m. playing video games, and then suddenly there's just like a weird switch.
Slide back. You're growing, man. You're passing that torch to your younger kid in the background who's typing away, who's going to be up way too late, typing away and probably building some Minecraft or something.
Oh, I know. That's the best though, when I come down to tell them to go to bed and writing code, like.
You're like, you gotta go to bed. You're like, I'm so proud. I love that, brother. Jason, man, it's been beautiful. Let's catch up soon. If we can meet up in person, I'd love to. Where are you at these days? Are you in San Diego?
Just outside LA.
Just outside
Same
LA.
area, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, let's get together, man.
Hold on, little man.
Wait. Okay. Yeah, you sound like your hands are busy. All right, brother. Hey, have a beautiful night. Enjoy the fam. Enjoy the code, man. And I'll see you soon, brother.
All right, man. Thanks.
There you go. See you later. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening. See you on the other side.